The spray of water was supposed to last only a few seconds, but somehow it changed two lonely lives forever. I had been standing on my porch early that Saturday morning, watering the dying flowers I had inherited from my late mother, when a sudden gust of wind pushed the hose in the wrong direction. A fine shower of water landed directly on my new neighbor. She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, soaked from her shoulders to her shoes, and looked at me with an expression I would never forget. I expected anger. Maybe even an angry complaint to the landlord. Instead, she smiled, brushed the wet hair away from her face, and gave me a playful look that made my heart skip. Her unexpected response was the beginning of something I never knew I needed. Before I tell you what happened next, if you believe that sometimes the smallest accidents can lead to second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Studio. You never know when one ordinary moment might become the turning point in someone's life. My name is Daniel, and for the past 2 years, my life had become painfully quiet. I worked from home, ate most of my meals alone, and rarely spoke to anyone outside the grocery store or my office calls. After my mother passed away, the little house where I had grown up suddenly felt much bigger. Her flower garden was the only part of it that still felt alive. Every morning, I watered the roses, trimmed the leaves, and tried to convince myself that keeping those plants alive somehow meant I was keeping a piece of her with me. Then, one Monday afternoon, a moving truck stopped outside the house next door. A woman named Emily stepped out carrying a cardboard box filled with books. She looked tired but determined. Over the next few days, I noticed her leaving for work early and returning late. She was friendly whenever we crossed paths, but there was something distant in her eyes. I recognized that look because I had seen it in my own reflection many times. Our first real interaction happened that Saturday morning. I was watering my mother's roses while Emily walked past the fence carrying a cup of coffee. The hose slipped from my hand when I reached for a fallen garden tool. The nozzle swung around, and before I could react, water sprayed across Emily. She froze. I froze. For 3 terrible seconds, neither of us moved. Then she looked down at her soaked blouse and jeans before slowly looking back at me. I began apologizing so quickly that I could barely breathe. I expected her to yell, but instead she laughed. She told me that after the week she'd had, a surprise shower was probably exactly what she needed. Then she gave me the teasing smile and jokingly suggested that if I wanted her attention, there were easier ways to ask. I laughed nervously, but her words stayed with me all day. That evening, there was a knock on my door. It was Emily holding 2 cups of coffee. She said she thought I deserved a peace offering after nearly drowning her. We sat on the porch, and for the first time in months, I talked to someone without checking the clock. Emily told me she had recently moved to town after a difficult breakup. She had left behind an apartment, a job she hated, and friends who had slowly chosen sides. She said starting over sounded exciting until she actually had to do it. I understood more than I wanted to admit. Over the next few weeks, our friendship grew naturally. Emily would sometimes sit on the porch while I watered the plants. She started helping me revive the garden, bringing home small pots of flowers whenever she found something beautiful. We laughed about the accidental water attack so often that it became our private joke. But beneath the laughter, something deeper was happening. Emily was slowly bringing color back into my life. I began cooking actual meals instead of eating frozen food. I started opening the curtains in the morning. I even repaired the old wooden bench my mother had once loved. Emily noticed every little change, although she never made a big deal about it. One evening, while we were sitting in the garden, Emily asked why I had stopped traveling, meeting people, and doing things I used to enjoy. I told her that after losing my mother, I had become afraid of losing anyone else. Staying alone seemed safer. Emily became quiet. Then she admitted that she had been doing almost the same thing. Her breakup had taught her to expect disappointment, so she had started protecting herself by never letting anyone get close. That conversation changed everything. We began realizing that we weren't just neighbors anymore. We were 2 people who had somehow found each other at exactly the moment when both needed someone to remind them that life wasn't over. But just when things seemed to be getting better, Emily received a phone call that changed her plans. She had been offered a promotion in another city. It was an opportunity she had wanted for years, and accepting it meant leaving within a month. She didn't tell me immediately. I found out by accident when I saw the moving boxes stacked in her hallway. My heart sank. For the first time since meeting her, I felt that old fear returning. The fear of getting attached only to be abandoned again. Instead of telling Emily how much she meant to me, I pulled away. I stopped sitting on the porch. I watered the garden early in the morning when I knew she would be at work. When she knocked on my door, I pretended I was busy. I convinced myself that if I ended the friendship first, leaving would hurt less. But it didn't. It hurt more. 3 days before Emily was supposed to leave, I found a note attached to my garden hose. It said she was disappointed that the men who had accidentally sprayed her with water had somehow become afraid to speak to her. I walked next door. Emily was standing in her empty living room, surrounded by boxes. I finally told her the truth. I told her I was scared. Scared that if she left, the house would become quiet again. Scared that I had allowed myself to care about someone after promising myself I never would. Emily listened without interrupting. Then she told me something I hadn't expected. She had accepted the promotion, but she hadn't accepted the idea that our friendship had to end. She said distance could be difficult, but pretending not to care was worse. That night, we sat in the garden until the stars appeared. We didn't make unrealistic promises. We simply promised to keep choosing honesty instead of fear. Emily left the following morning. The house felt empty again, but this time, it wasn't hopeless. I kept watering my mother's flowers. I started meeting friends again. I joined a community gardening group. I even began planning small weekend trips, something I hadn't done in years. And every few days, Emily called. Months later, she returned for a visit. When I opened my front door, she was standing there with a suitcase and the same playful smile from the day I accidentally sprayed her. She looked at the garden and smiled. The roses were blooming everywhere. She told me my mother would have been proud. I smiled and told her there was only one problem. She asked what it was. I pointed toward the hose and told her I had learned my lesson and would never spray her again. She laughed and said maybe that was unfortunate because the first accident had worked out pretty well. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch silently. Like the video, share it with someone who may need a reminder that starting over is possible, and subscribe to Kindness Studio for more stories about love, kindness, and second chances. And before we reach the ending, I have one special request. Comment, second chances are worth it, if you believe that one unexpected moment can change someone's life. Because sometimes, life doesn't knock on your door with a grand announcement. Sometimes it arrives as a simple accident, a stranger's smile, a cup of coffee, or a garden hose pointed in the wrong direction. Daniel thought he had lost the ability to feel close to someone again. Emily thought starting over meant leaving everything behind. But their accidental meeting taught them something neither had expected. Healing doesn't always happen when the past disappears. Sometimes healing begins when someone new gives you a reason to look toward the future. And it all started with a little water, a surprised smile, and a flirty reply that neither of them would ever forget.